Have you ever been in the situation where you look at your 3D game and thought like, damn, this looks so realistic? Well, how about I tell you that all of that isn't real?
Of course it's not real, it's a video game.
That's not what I mean. What I want to say is that all the many hours you have spent in Minecraft, you actually played Terraria. Because 3D in games aren't actually 3D, but 2D. How's that? Yeah, because you're looking at your monitor, which only gives you a 2D screen. Okay, thanks for watching, bye! I could have ended the video right now, but there's so much more behind that subject. This came into my mind when I started developing my game. To start understanding what we will talk about, let me explain you what a 3D model is. A 3D model is a digital representation of an object in 3 dimensions. It has the dimensions width, height and depth. First, we have vertices. These are points in space with coordinates. They mark the corners or intersections of the 3D shape. Next, we have edges, which are the lines connecting these vertices. They outline the structure of our model. When we connect multiple edges, we form faces or polygons. Typically in 3D modeling, these faces are triangles because they are stable and efficient for calculations. All these elements together, vertices, edges and polygons, form a mesh. A mesh is the complete network that defines the shape and surface of a 3D object. So let's dive deeper into how 3D models are built and how they create the illusion of depth and solidity. In 3D modeling, objects are created using those polygons we created earlier with the vertices and edges. The most common type of polygon used in 3D modeling is the triangle. Why triangles? Because they are the simplest polygon that can define a plane in 3D space, making them stable and efficient for calculations. Now let's talk about the difference between the real 3D world and the virtual 3D world. In the real world, objects have true physical dimensions. They occupy space, have volume, and you can interact with them directly. In contrast, in the virtual world, what we perceive as 3D is actually a clever trick. These 3D objects are projected onto a 2D screen. Our monkey brains interpret these projections as three-dimensional due to visual cues like perspective, shading, and motion. The 3D models you see in games and applications are essentially flat images that change as you move the camera, giving the illusion of depth. Alright, let's imagine this for a second. Picture a simple square on your screen. Now, let's place another square right behind it. And another. And another. Eventually, it looks like we have created a cube, right? But hold on. What have we really done here? Does this look 3D to you now? No? Okay. How about we add some edges? Boom! Your brain goes, hey, that's a cube. But is it really? All we have done is stack several 2D squares behind each other and added some edges, yet this might be already enough for you to think that this is 3D. Let's take this a step further. What if we add a shadow? Suddenly the whole thing feels more solid, more three-dimensional. But guess what? It's still just a bunch of flat squares and a shadow. The shadow is doing a lot of the heavy lifting here, tricking your brain into seeing depth where there is none. And now for the twist. What if I told you that even the shadow is just another 2D trick? That's right, the shadow itself is just an overlap of these 2D shapes. So, in reality, the cube and its shadow are nothing more than a stack of flat images cleverly arranged to fool your eyes. Your brain does the rest, filling in the gaps and creating a 3D effect where there isn't one. Crazy, right? To make 3D models look realistic, use textures and lighting. Textures are 2D images applied to the surface of a 3D model. They add details like color, patterns, and even small bumps and grooves without increasing the model's complexity. This makes objects appear more detailed than they actually are. Lighting is crucial for creating depth and realism. By simulating how light interacts with surfaces, we can create highlights and shadows, giving objects a more three-dimensional appearance. Techniques like ambient, diffuse, and specular lighting help in achieving these effects. Alright, before your brain melts from all these details, let's take a quick detour through history. It's 1980. No fancy shaders, no ray tracing, no RTX cards. What did we have? Battlezone. A game made up of simple wireframes. It was like playing in a neon outline world. But back then, this was cutting edge. Fast forward to 1992 and we get Ultima Underworld. This game gave us fully textured 3D environments for the first time. You could explore, interact and actually feel immersed in a fantasy world. It wasn't just lines and shapes anymore, it was the dawn of believable virtual spaces. And now? We have got games like Cyberpunk 2077 or even Minecraft with ray tracing pushing the boundaries. With real-time lighting, reflections and shadows, modern games bring us closer than ever to real 3D. Something is not right. Why is that cube so light? They are hollow. When we think about it, the polygons that we use are nothing else than 2D triangles in a 3D space. It is like taking multiple photos and build a big 3D picture out of it, much like a 3D puzzle. But what is inside this 3D puzzle? Right, nothing! If we move our camera and steer it into our model, we can see that there's actually nothing inside. We have been lied to from the very beginning. And here's the catch, most 3D models are actually like this. They might look solid from the outside, but inside there's often less than in the brain of Google's new AI model. This is where the illusion comes into play. When you interact with objects in a game, you are not interacting with a solid 3D object, and instead you are seeing a detailed shell made up of vertices, edges and faces that give the impression of solidity and depth, with code added to them to give them physical properties. This illusion is what makes 3D in games fake. The game engine doesn't render solid objects because that would require immense computational power and memory. Instead, it uses hollow models to create the appearance of reality while saving resources, and it applies physics on those hollow models. So by lying to us, they actually do us a pretty big favor, since our computers and consoles wouldn't be able to handle the 3D objects otherwise. By applying certain shading and textures that give you the illusion of depth, more polygons aren't necessary and energy is being saved. With less polygons, your console or computer can handle much bigger maps with more frames per second without looking bad when we apply all those techniques for faking. So we have learned something about the structure of 3D modeling and how all these elements make us think that we see 3 dimensions instead of 2. 3D might be fake, but does that make games bad? No, of course not. Nothing really changes for our eyes, because why should that matter anyway? Don't we already know that all that light inside our monitor does not represent reality?